the broadening and sharing of concerns. You can go today to the most remote village in Egypt and ask the postman what kind of mail he handles, and he will tell you that people in the village receive letters from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Morocco, Bahrain. It really is not too much to imagine that these names were never uttered in Egyptian peasant circles 15 years ago. In the 1950s and 60s, which were the heyday of the Arab nationalist movement, nationalist leaders like President Nasser could not count on the kind of awareness and direct experience of other Arab societies that exists among the people today.
في الدول العربية اللي هي مثلا لسه نامية غير الشعب المصري، يعني مثلا هنقول مثال السعودية، هنقول مثال الكويت، هنقول مثال الإمارات، هنقول مثال الدول دي، بالنسبة التعداد بتاعها ضعيف، إنما إحنا تعدادنا كتير، فعلشان كده هم عندهم بترول، إحنا عندنا اليد العاملة الكادحة، فإحنا نقدر نقول إن إحنا أحسن منهم. أحسن منهم في إيه؟ في اليد العاملة. إيه الفايدة؟ أنا معايا فلوس لكن مش قادر أعمل بيها حاجة، بستعين بإخواتي العرب، بستعين بولاد العرب علشان يعملوا بلدي، وعلى أساس إن يكون بلد واحدة. فإحنا أملنا من ربنا سبحانه وتعالى إن جميع الدول العربية عموما تكون كدولة واحدة اقتصاديا.
This is a man who in the last 20 years has been to Libya, has been to the Gulf and elsewhere in the Arab world, and he thinks that those who have money ought to get together with those who have skills and labor in order to build the Arab world. And he, of course, expects of the leaders of the Arab world to cooperate along those lines. There is much that is implicit in this of the rise of a new awareness, political and economic, which simply would not have come about were it not for the fact that this man and tens of thousands like him have been engaged in this intimate process of living and working and engaging with other Arab societies. This simply has not happened before. It is happening now. Its implications and its consequences will definitely shape the course of society, events, and politics in the coming years. In the 1970s, the increasing price and importance of oil inspired a great surge of optimism in the Arab world. There was talk of how the Arabs, thanks to their oil wealth, would become a major world power. And indeed, the oil money created impressive material progress, especially in the oil-rich countries themselves. In the 1970s, the gross national product of the Arab world rose from $40 billion to $214 billion. The super-rich Arab states, concentrated in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, represent about 7% of the total population of the Arab world. But even the super-rich are not really rich by the standards of the developed industrialized world, the popular Western image of the Arabs notwithstanding.
There has been material progress everywhere. If you measure progress in terms of income per capita, the Arab world as a whole has tripled its income in the last 10 years. If you look at it in terms of education, number of enrollment in schools, if you look at it in terms of electrification of the countryside, or purification of water, or construction of roads, or airports, or airlines, and along some of these material indicators of progress, the Arab world has an impressive record, and I think for the long run, it ought to have some positive impact. However, growth is not to be confused with development. If we think of development as comprehensive, as balanced, as improving the quality of human life, and of enhancing human rights and establishing equity along with growth. If you think along these terms, then the record is mixed. There is an avalanche of consumer goods. There is all kind of new Cadillacs, Mercedes, everything that the Western industrial arsenal produces you would find in the Arab world. But not every Arab has access to these goods. So as you find a lopsided or a maldistribution of wealth among the Arab states, you find a similar maldistribution of wealth within each Arab state that creates all kind of social unrest.
But how does this social unrest express itself?
You have a rise in the Islamic militant movement. You have fundamentalism in Egypt, in Sudan, in Tunisia, in Morocco, everywhere. Yeah. You will not find it uncommon to walk in the streets of Cairo or Casablanca or close to the university campuses. It will not be uncommon to see a lot of veiled young women going to the medical school or engineering, which looks like a contradiction in terms, how could a medical student be veiled, but they are. And this is, again, something that we devoted Western observers, because the veil has come to symbolize reactionary or conservative tendencies. Yes. As a matter of fact, the mothers of many of these girls who are veiled now are ones who fought 30 or 40 or 50 years ago against the veil. These were the women who pulled away the veil as a sign of liberation. Yeah. Now, 40 or 50 years later, their grandchildren are going back to the veil out of their own volition. As a sign of protest, actually, against the regimes, against the Western penetration, against the vulgar development that's sweeping everywhere. Consumerism, maldistribution of wealth, the decadence that comes with money.
All of them speak in the name of Islam. But if I want to generalize, I would correlate Islamic groups with westernization, with alienation. I mean, if I am trying to find something in general, the more westernization you have in society, and I'm using my words carefully, I did not say modernization, I did not say development. I say westernization, which is a vulgar, provocative, and undesirable process in my view. The more westernization you are having in a society, the more alienation you get in that society, the more militant Islamic fundamentalism you are going to get in that society as well. In fact, sometimes people who study Islam or Islamic movements, and they don't understand that one of the issues these people usually speak about is morality, sex, women. And this is not a hang-up. At a deeper level, we know that morality is the last defense. A nation, I mean, the last line of defense for a collectivity, for a human group, is to stick to your morality.
The veil has proved to be as much a symbol of progressive as of reactionary trends. For both unveiling and veiling have signified liberation of a sort. Is a young Egyptian woman attending medical school traditional or modern? And how does her free choice to wear Islamic dress qualify one's response to this question?
I feel that I should be a complete Muslim, not only obeying some of its rules and rejecting some. And of course, Yusra encouraged me.
Maybe it is a kind of protest against what was happening in the last 20 years, in being too much westernized, and we were just imitating Western civilization.
Now I feel comforted very much and I feel protected as well. And I feel that all people respect me for that. That's all.
Our problem is that we are not uniting. We are wasting all our powers in fighting with each other. And I believe that the Western people, not the Western people, the Western politics is trying to accelerate these fights between the Arabs to prevent them from being united and to keep them weak.
Islam will lead us from how to form our government down to how to brush your teeth. And we are not forcing anybody to follow our values. If they like it, okay, you are welcome. But we will not take our own values and impose it on Christians, on Western life. What I see right, they will see wrong. I see that this dress is to protect my dignity as a woman. Simone de Beauvoir will see that this is an attack against women and violation of women's dignity. I will not go and force Simone de Beauvoir to put on Muslim dress. And I refuse Simone de Beauvoir to make that big trip to go to Imam Khomeini with rudeness and guts to tell him, don't apply this Muslim rule on Muslim women. Subhanallah. This is very strange.
All these things are being reacted to by young men and women in the Arab world, sometimes in a peaceful way or symbolic way like the veil, and sometimes in a very fierce, violent way like we saw in October 1981, the assassination of Sadat.
But it was in Iran, a Middle Eastern society which is Muslim but not Arab, that Islamic fundamentalism accomplished its most spectacular results. The Iranian Islamic Revolution has affected the whole world, and particularly the neighboring Arabs.
The Shah and all his works were swept away 2.5 weeks ago in a revolution Khomeini spent most of his adult life working toward. When Khomeini appeared, he delivered a hard, uncompromising speech condemning Western influence in Iran. He said the new Iranian Islamic Republic would be inspired by the stern religious principles of Islam, nothing else.
And look at the Iranian revolution. The Iranians have become a party to Arab partisan, to Arab politics. And that had never happened in the last 30 or 40 years. And if a man from Syria who lived in that romantic, pan-Arabistic era, he would say, this is a heresy. It could be a heresy, but it's a fact now. And what brought up that fact? What brought about that fact? What engineered it? Again, I tell you, the absence of consensus among Arab countries. On the contrary, it's the escalation of tension, the ascendancy of division. That's what brought it about.
The Islam solution is logic. And as I said, if we missed Islam last century, or at the turn of this century 20, we are not going to miss it at the turn of the 21st century. Of course, our leaders, or the presidents, or the kings, or the prince of the Arab countries, they always claim that they are Muslims. In the meantime, they say that Samahat al-Imam al-Khomeini is trying to export Muslim revolution to Muslims, even though it sounds so ironic. Muslim revolution to be export to Muslims. Very strange. I can never understand this construction. Even if I can take it, and even if I am ready to obey it, why the leaders go and import from President Reagan anti-Islamic revolution? If they don't want me to take or to import Islamic revolution from Imam Khomeini, they should not import anti-Islamic revolution from Reagan. Reagan is consistent to himself. I'm not blaming him. He is Christian, devoted Christian. He is American. He has interests for himself as a Christian and as an American. It happens that our interest in conflict with his interest.
In an area which is still in search of itself and in search of its place in the world. And in an area where the final forms, maybe the word final I don't like, but the most stable forms of political and social organizations have not developed yet. I mean, when I look at so many Arab countries, including my own country, Egypt, I do not think that the prevailing ideas, that the prevailing structures, these will be the structures of tomorrow. I can see very much the transitory nature of so many of the things that surrounds me.
If they can listen to our people, they can protect themselves. But they don't want to listen to our people. They find it very easy to declare democracy and to arrest you at night.
What about the public media?
Well,
the press, television, things of that sort. To what extent are these, to what extent is there room within these for free expression?
in fact, this is one of the major problems here, because the press usually is not free. The television is owned by the state, by the government, the radio. During Sadat, I was blacklisted. Any writer who is just criticizing objectively or scientifically anything that the government is not approving, they can just put him on the blacklist, so he never appears in the television or the radio. He cannot publish in the newspaper. They can censor their books, as happened to me and some other writers.
It is like a bad marriage, you know. There are always quarrels, you know, between the authority and the writers. And this is quite natural, because while our culture is far more evoluted and progressed, our governments are still in the adolescent period, you know, and they wouldn't tolerate any discussion or criticism, especially criticism.
أنا بفهم الأمور بشكل شوي يعني قد يكون معكوس. المشكلة يمكن مش مع النظام، المشكلة أكثر مع الأجهزة يلي بتنفذ. الأجهزة التنفيذية دائما تقع بالغلط. هالغلط بينعكس على الناس. بجوز هذه المشكلة مثلا حرية التعبير موجودة مثلا بشكل 50% هون، بشكل 40% في قطر ثاني، لكن هي مشكلة موجودة، بجوز تختلف نسبها. مشان هيك لما عرضت كاسك يا وطن بتونس الناس ظنت انه هذه المسرحية فبركت لتونس، وكأني انا عايش الحياة التونسية، علما انه انا عمري ما رحت تونس الا في افتتاح العمل. طبعا هذا بيرجي قديش في تشابه بحياتنا في البلاد العربية بشكل خاص وبدول العالم الثالث بشكل عام، في مشكلة العلاقة بين النظام وبين المواطن. عم يفسد هذه العلاقة أجهزة التنفيذ.
لا عم بتفتح، بس المشكلة المبلغ كبير ومو قدرتي أصرفه.
حاول أرجوك ياسين لا تردني خائبا. ثمن فنجان قهوة يساعدك على تحمل الأعباء، باعتبار أنت.
إنما إحنا ما نعرفش عن كده، ولو نعرف بنعرف من جريدة، من تلفزيون، من ناشرة أخبار، فإذا ما نعرفش الكلي. فده كله مع الناس اللي هي المسؤولة، وربنا يوفقهم وبإذن الله يحببهم في بعض ويخليهم تفكيرهم كله يطلع في اتجاه واحد لنصر الدين الإسلامي وفي الوحدة العربية، وربنا يوفق.
So the institutions of independent government in the Arab world are quite recent. Most of the Arab world was under colonialism or direct rule by England and France mostly until the Second World War. The gap that was created in the history of the Middle East by imperialism, for example, just take the British occupied Egypt in 1882. When they occupied Egypt, then all important positions in government and all the decisions were made by Englishmen. By the time you get rid of the British or the French and begin, then you're not beginning with experience of actual rule and building. Therefore, you make mistakes. We don't know what things would have been like had there been continuous native experience in government from the 19th century until now. Maybe it would have been better, maybe it would have been worse. But there would have at least been a continuity of experience instead of having a real gap of 3 or 4 quite significant generations. Now, it's only been really one generation since independence, since the early 50s. Therefore, if one says these governments are still adolescent, in a way that I think is sort of accurate in this sense.
I think the real issue, the basic issue facing the Arab world in the 1980s, and we've seen it in the last 2 or 3 years, is the fact that there are no political institutions by which the average Arab man and woman can be involved in the decision-making process that affects their daily life. So now people are saying, well, we need to be involved in what we're doing every day. And I don't mean that they want to be involved in terms of the, Camp David or the North-South dialogue or East-West the relations. No, it's a very simple feeling that you need to be consulted, that you need to be involved in decisions about the education system, the availability of medical care, priorities in agriculture, all of these simple things, what's on TV, what's on radio, the press, etc. And there is no country in the Arab world where the average man and woman in the street are consulted about this.
Now, priority number 1 for all Arab intellectuals, educated classes, middle class, small middle class, is democracy. Yeah. Because I now realize that even the dream of Arab unity, the dream of independence, of social justice, could not be attained, and achievements could not be guarded and protected without democracy. They have seen that whatever was achieved under Nasser was somewhat reversed in the absence of democracy by his successor. And therefore, even the most authoritarian pawn or the most blind believer in Nasser as a charismatic leader now would say that one of the biggest mistakes of Nasser is that he did not lay the foundations for a democratic rule before he died. And this is the priority number 1 now for the Arab nationalist movement. Not unity immediately, but democracy first, because it is within a democratic framework. Much of what the Arabs want to do could be achieved better and could avoid the whims of the rulers.
How do you feel about the condition of the Arab world now, or the Arabs?
Terrible. Distortion. And we never have been like that, and completely lost. And I think there is a kind of understanding between the two powers, between America and Soviet Union, implicit understanding to keep us like that for their strategic purposes. And if Israel is still the problem of Israel is still as it is, which is the source of an instability for our region, 1,000 or unlimited questions will stay without an answer.
Now, the Saudis and Sadat, to some extent, have more or less projected in the mid-70s a strategy to the Arabs, saying that America has most of the cards for the Arab-Israeli conflict. 99%. Or 99% of the cards for the Arab-Israeli conflict. And therefore, our alliance with them would be helpful in settling that question in an equitable way, giving back or restoring at least most of the Palestinian rights, defending the area against foreign influence, and developing economically along Western ways. We'll get the technology from the West, we'll get the technical assistance from the West, and so on. And to be sure, many Arabs, especially middle-class Arabs, have given that kind of vision, which was contrary to Nasser's vision, has given that vision the benefit of the doubt. But then, I think at the end of the 70s and the early 80s, it was clear that nearly 10 years later, after trying this vision, the Arabs were back at square one. So they think that the Saudis to some extent, and Sadat to a great extent as well, have been betrayed by the West, have tried to sell the West to their fellow Arabs, and then the outcome was 1982. Lebanon being invaded, civilians being massacred, the West dragging its feet, making all kinds of excuses for its poor performance in coming to their aid, or in at least bringing about a fair conclusion to the Arab-Israeli conflict. And therefore, the pro-Western regimes in this part of the world are now perceived by their own people not only as having failed to achieve positively along the course of independence, including an equitable solution for the Palestinian question, but they think that there has been a regression, that the West has taken them for an easy ride, has taken its own allies for an easy ride, has in fact deceived them.
I mean, the main issue facing us politically is, as you know, that the Palestine question or problem or issue, or whatever you like to call it. Here is a clear case where interests of one great power, the United States, should tell the United States to take a course at least a little bit neutral between the Arabs and the Israelis, yet they are unable to do so. And in this sense, a great power involvement here is really...
Yeah, but I have a point of view about that, which I'd like to state to you.
Yes.
The United States supports Israel. It supported it strongly 30 years ago, more strongly 15 years ago, supports it even more strongly now. Meanwhile, the position of the United States in the Arab world improves all the time, all the time. I mean, the two major Arab countries, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, are very close allies of the United States. The influence of the United States everywhere is stronger now. So why should the United States change a policy that gains it greater and greater influence in the Arab world? I mean, now, if I were an American policymaker, I will say, stay on this course, keep doing more of the same.
Until it explodes. I mean, is that what the American government would like to see eventually happening? Perhaps I am inhibited by reason, by my education, etc., from exploding in an emotional way. I wonder whether this is true of ordinary people, ordinary Arabs who also see this happening. And if you remember, very few people would take seriously the idea of a popular revolution like the one that happened in Iran 2 years before it happened. But then it just exploded, you know, almost out of nowhere. Until the very last moment, people in the West were not believing that such thing could happen. I'm not saying that this could happen in the Arab world, but it might. Frustration might lead eventually to this, because as the American government grows, as the support of the American government grows for Israel, it is encouraging Israel to think in imperial terms. And therefore Israel is not really after peace, which is even acceptable to the West. No, that's not good enough. That will produce only a country, a normal-sized country, by Middle Eastern standards, of 3 million people. Gifted people, yes, but nevertheless, a small-sized country of 3 million people. That is not really what they want now. They are being, their appetite is whetted by United States, by American support, to think, to ask the dreamlike questions. What is to stop us from moving across, you know? Victorious generals have a habit of just moving across and creating empires. This is why, although the paradox is there, American support to Israel is growing, yet their position apparently is improving in the Arab world. I would say that it will lead to an explosion. And I don't know whether the United States government would like to risk an all or nothing situation, because that is, in my view, what could happen.
you can think of where the Arab world today and where it's going, is to recall the major objectives that the Arabs have fought for in the last 100-odd years. One of them definitely is a quest for unification, Arab unity. And attached to that is a quest for independence.